Do you ever find yourself just tuning God out? Do you find yourself tuning God out like you do to your parents, you do to your teachers, you do to your friends even? Do you find yourself treating God as if he's a friend on Facebook and he's chatting with you and you're just like, I just kind of want to not talk to you right now? Do you tune God out? In the winter of 1991, the University of the Pacific released a review describing in detail the events that occurred in 1986 at Chernobyl. Now, for many of you guys, you don't necessarily know what Chernobyl was because you weren't even born then. Chernobyl was a nuclear power plant that had a huge meltdown. Okay, what had happened was that so many lives were lost, millions upon millions of dollars were spent in repair, reconstruction, revitalization of the community, and even Eastern Europe. This was such a huge loss, not to mention the countless numbers and levels of radiation that were released into the environment and to the atmosphere. Now, there were two electrical engineers in the control room that night. Now, what they were doing could be said as, at best, playing around. Okay, the Soviets later released a review saying that what the two electrical engineers were doing that night, unauthorized experiments. What they were doing, they were trying to get the turbines to move as fast as they could. So they turned the power off so they would just go. What these turbines do is they cool down the nuclear facility, okay, so it actually creates energy. When the turbines go super fast, it heats it up, okay? That's when you get the nuclear meltdown. There were different systems along the way that kept saying, danger, danger, do not proceed, stop, go no further. Are you sure you want to do this? Stop. Okay. Now there were 6 different computers. All of those computers were set up to protect those 2 electrical engineers and everyone else that worked at the nuclear power facility. Okay. And yet, those 2 electrical engineers saw the warning signs, they recognized them, but yet they continued to ignore them. So we know the result of those 2 electrical engineers ignoring those warning signs. All right? The largest industrial accident ever. Okay, and it's a tragedy. Yet they knew the warnings, they knew the risks, yet they ignored them. We often see this in Scripture, right? Scripture is kind of our warning, and we see these things. We see these like kind of guidelines like, oh, stop, kind of, go no further sort of things. But yet we ignore them. And we ignore them at our own risk. And tragically enough, we ignore them at the risks of others. So people will rarely reject the Bible because it contradicts itself, but rather, people will reject the Bible because it contradicts them. We see this in Scripture, in Hebrews 4:12, when it says, the Word is alive and powerful. It's sharper than a double-edged sword, cutting through the soul and the spirit. It knows our innermost thoughts and desires. Wow. When we read that, it's like, oh man, that is some heavy stuff right there. And oftentimes that verse is pretty convicting. Just because it's like innermost thoughts, desires. Pretty much pointing to my sinful nature. Because I'm a sinful person, okay? I'm a sinner, I'm a broken person, just like you guys, okay? And it sucks, but that's just the truth of it. So, we're sinners, we are broken. But what's redeeming about that? God's love and God's grace. And just how awesome that is, that yes, we're sinners, we're broken, we understand that, right? So we have God's love, we have God's grace. And I guess he's kind of like, that scripture is just kind of like the warning signs, if you want to say. Those computers, that'll be like, hey, danger, danger, danger. Go no further, caution. Okay, not saying like the Bible will give you all those answers, like go this way, but we need to see the Bible as a compass, in a way of kind of pointing to a general direction that we need to go in with God's love and God's grace. Now thinking about the Bible and what really needs to happen when we read it is we need to start reading for truth. Okay, we need to start reading for truth opposed to just reading the little black words on the white page. And sometimes that's difficult because it's convicting, and oftentimes I found myself just like, wow, I am broken. Okay, and so one of the most applicable ways, because this is different for everyone has a different way to apply this to their life. One of the most applicable ways for me is finding a way that Scripture is in my life and a part of my life. That way when these warning signs come up, I can recognize them easily. I can see it and be like, whoa, okay, and what I'm doing, does that line up with Scripture? Does that line up with what God has to say? And with that said, do you want to be the type of person that is consistently tuning God out? Just really not aware of what he's saying? Or do you want to be that type of person that is just like, I'm all yours, God. Let me hear what you have to say.